On today's show, Chet Holmgren gets his payday from the Thunder. Does OKC need to start worrying about the second apron, plus the best remaining NBA free agents and Vegas Summer League storylines? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And joining me is my partner in crime, the host of Locked On Heat, David Ramil. David, how excited are you that we're about to start real Summer League instead of the fake California Classic Summer League?
It's always fun. I'm disappointed I'm not getting to cover it this year because it's just a wonderful mix of chaos and basketball, and I love that. But Summer League is a great opportunity just to see. You're like walking around arena and you're next to like some NBA legend or a coach or a player, or you're sitting in the stands and you're sitting next to general managers from across the league. It's just so much fun. And then to see the actual basketball product on the court, always great to see these young players kind of cut their teeth and get an opportunity. And my heart goes out specifically to those players who are looking to just get some kind of foothold into the league, because might be their last opportunity. It's either this or maybe retiring or maybe going internationally or something along those lines. And so Summer League is always a great opportunity to see those players kind of stand out.
We'll get into some Summer League storylines a little bit later on in today's episode. We'll also be tackling the best remaining NBA free agents. We're about a week and a half into this free agency period, so who are the best names still available on the board? But where we're starting first is Chet Holmgren getting his rookie max extension from the Oklahoma City Thunder, an absolute payday for the Thunder, big man fresh off their title run. Let's go out to Locked On Thunder host Rylan Stiles for more.
Thunder have locked up Chet Holmgren to a long-term deal with momentum toward locking up J-Dub as well, which would put all three core members of this Thunder team under a long-term contract with the reigning champions. Look, this is a great move. I know that people love to talk about the boogeyman in the closet of the second apron. And yes, it is a real concern for every team in the NBA. But for the Thunder specifically, they have so many ways to navigate around it that if the Thunder can't do it, then no team can do it. And every side better opt out of the CBA and rework things, because Oklahoma City will have their three core guys intact, and now on the margins, they're going to have to make some tough calls on guys like Isaiah Hartenstein, guys like Lou Dort, guys that are getting paid at that top level on their roster, and fill it back in with these bevy of draft picks that they have, and already having guys like Wiggins, like Joe, like Mitchell on cost-controlled deals. So whenever you factor in how clean their cap sheet is, while maxing out these guys, the Thunder should be in the driver's seat to have sustained success even under this big, bad, scary CBA. And if they can't do it, then nobody can.
All right, David. So first off, the Chet Holmgren extension, 5-year rookie max could reach up to $250 million. This on the heels of the supermax extension given to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The first year that both of these extensions would be in effect, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is slotted to make $60 million, and then Chet Holmgren would be slotted to make about $45 million, so $105 million combined across two players on the Thunder roster. That would be in the 27-28 season starting that year. And then same could be said for the potential J-Dub extension further down the line as well, depending on what happens there. Let's start right here. How do you feel about this second apron crunch that teams are facing now, where you have this Thunder team, homegrown talent, they just won a title, and now even off the heels of this title run, it's like, okay, well, how long is this window realistically going to be open for? Because you are going to have to factor in losing certain guys like Isaiah Hartenstein, like Lou Dort, like Alex Caruso down the line as these extensions kick in for their big three.
Yeah, wasn't that the whole purpose of the revised CBA? It was just to be able to get these teams in smaller markets, the opportunity to lock in these players for longer, to be able to compete against the bigger markets, to be able to pay their homegrown stars the kind of money they need in order to extend their championship windows. And somehow it's out there is trying to save money as much as possible because the penalties are so great for exceeding that first apron and second apron, and it just makes it very difficult to not just build a team but also to maintain that kind of roster construction. So I don't know. I can't speak to Oklahoma City's perspective. I think Ryland made a clear point that at least you have the opportunity, and as good as well as Sam Presti and that organization have constructed that team, there are avenues for them to be able to retain some of their flexibility. But it feels difficult as a fan of the game and to see a team like the Thunder build something and not be able to sustain it, because it's just again, you just want to be able to see these teams have that sort of ability to compete year after year after year. And while they may still be able to do so, the rosters are going to change so dramatically. You're going to lose key players here and there because of the penalties, the financial restrictions put in place.
Here, I want to ask you this though, David, with on the heels of the Hartenstein extension, or sorry, not the Hartenstein extension, I apologize, the Holmgren extension, and with the Thunder, barreling towards coming to terms on an agreement with J-Dub as well. If push comes to shove, I think we see two kind of styles of team building these days, where you can have your three big stars, your big three, and then the spending becomes very, very cheap around the edges, around containing those big three, keeping that big three together. You have to go with cheap young talent, vet minimum guys, that kind of deal. Or you can have more of a dynamic that's more akin to like what the Indiana Pacers have, where they've got their clear two-star players, Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam, both making star-level money. And then you've got the role players around them that you're able to spend a little bit more on. You can prioritize depth a little bit more. And so do you have a feeling of which one of those dynamics you think is going to play out better in the long term, either locking up three-star players and putting cheaper pieces around them, or having the two-star players and maybe a slightly more fleshed out roster around those guys?
I think it's the latter. I think we've seen the super team era already, and it kind of was just phased out. It's just harder to acquire those three players because we've seen how important it is to find depth. It's what makes Oklahoma City such an aberration, is that not only are their star players, their big three, so good, but their core, the core around them is also just as good. All those supporting players are really high value, high contributing players. And so that's what makes them stand out and put up the historic numbers that they did on their way to that championship run. I think for most teams, you won't be able to find that kind of balance where you'll be able to have those three stars and still build the supporting cast. So it's better to just have at least two-star level players and then have much more high-level role players so that you can continue to compete at a higher level against a team like Oklahoma City or others. So, yeah, I think we've seen that for a few years now, where we've understood the value of role players because they're so protected, because they always have those opportunities. Invariably, during a playoff run, you will see a role player have their moment in the sun where they can shine and put up the big numbers, and that leads to success at every level. And so it's important to, I think, build that supporting cast, and I think that's what we'll see from now on.
I'm very curious on this then. Assuming, they get the extension done with J-Dub, they're going to get it done. Like it's happening. Yeah. But down the line, once the Thunder start facing like the repercussions of the aprons and all that, obviously SGA is not going anywhere. They're keeping him, as long as humanly possible. If the Thunder were forced to choose between Chet Holmgren and J-Dub, who do you think they pick and why?
Ooh,
who's more important to the Thunder's success, or who do you think you could more easily replace their production or get close to, replacing in the aggregate, if you will?
My answer would be that they would try to keep Holmgren. I think because of the balance of what he brings defensively, offensively, I think I'm harder to find. Yeah, I think there's harder to find a player of that caliber at that size. And it's no knock on J-Dub, obviously, fantastic run, but you might be able to find something comparable, especially in the draft, especially with the number of picks they have too. So finding a player like Holmgren, very rare that you'll find a quality player at that size.
Coming up, who are the best remaining NBA free agents on the market, as well as storylines to be on the lookout for as we head into Las Vegas Summer League. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. Look, when I started using Monarch, I'll admit I was a little embarrassed at first, and kind of disappointed in myself to see how much I was spending just on food, like dining out at restaurants, fast food, delivery fees, all that stuff. Now I budget smarter and save more. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. And continuing on here at Locked On NBA, thanks so much for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, go find the Locked On Show for your favorite team. David, we are about a week and a half into NBA free agency. I want to ask you, who is the name that you are most surprised still hasn't signed to a deal so far in this free agency period?
Tough to say. I'm not necessarily looking at restricted free agents because I think there's such a challenge, especially now with the restrictions in place. Restricted free agency has always been very difficult to navigate, and it seems like it's even more difficult now. So if you're just looking at unrestricted free agents, I would say the two guards that I'm most surprised are still available are Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook. And I know we've seen this before with Russ, and yet he did have a bounce back year in Denver, and you wonder, can't a team take a chance? But it always just feels like these veteran players that are still playing, even though they're high level contributors still, it almost feels like they're taken for granted as free agency goes on. It's like you want to strike while the iron is hot on the younger player, on the player that you think is more important to your success. And in these, again, marginalized veteran players, they're just kind of kick the can down the road, and it's just like, oh, you know what? We can wait till late July. We can wait till the first week of August before we actually have to worry about signing a player like that. And it just feels unfair because both Paul and Westbrook were great contributors last year. You could make the same argument for Al Horford as well. He started a number of games, like he played at a high level as a contributor. And yeah, he's 39. Yeah, he's older. And yet, why wouldn't you want him on your team? Like, he's a championship caliber player and has been for a long time. You kind of need players like that on your team. So I would say any mix of those three players really are always interesting. The older veterans that are still available as free agents.
It always and it kind of makes you wind up wondering, some of the different priorities that these players start to have, as they get, a little older in their careers. Guys like Paul, Westbrook, Horford, to this point, right, with Chris Paul, there's all that reporting about him wanting to play closer to home after having,
right,
been so far away for so very long. And so it kind of seems like right now things are boiling down to one of either the Clippers or the Suns. A Suns reunion with Chris Paul would be interesting, pending, a potential Bradley Beal buyout. So either a Clippers reunion, a Suns reunion, possibly in place for Chris Paul. I guess he could go to the Kings if he wanted to be closer, but that's probably unlikely to happen. I'm surprised I'm not surprised we're not hearing more scuttlebutt about the Lakers potentially getting involved in Chris Paul, in all honesty, because there's been so much hubbub made over the years about Paul and LeBron eventually teaming up and trying to win a ring together. So
there's the rub. Is LeBron James actually part of the team?
There it is. We should have built a whole show around, LeBron James, future in LA, in danger, all caps title.
I think we already have.
Yeah, I think we've done at least a couple of those. All right, yeah. No, but in all sincerity, right? So like Chris Paul, his motivation's clearly kind of family oriented, but at the same time, I think the other thing with guys like CP3, like Westbrook, is they still believe that they are contributors at a very, very high level, and they can be, and they are, but they're also maybe not quite starting, like, not even maybe, like, I don't think either of them are true starting quality, like 30 plus a minute a night starters at this stage in their respective careers. And I think that's kind of the issue here, is both of them have a level of pride, I think we can safely say, in their respective games, that they would both like to be in that role. And I don't think that's the role that teams envision for them. So now they're kind of grappling with that and trying to find a potential home. I was honestly shocked that the Nuggets didn't elect to try and bring Russell Westbrook back this upcoming season with the roster moves that they did make. I thought Russ was a fantastic piece for them. So he's certainly a bit of a shocking name. Maybe he goes to a team that, he can just continue to play Russell Westbrook ball and be a terror and have the ball in his hands and run some second units. Who do you think would benefit the most? I know the Clippers is the team that keeps coming back for both Chris Paul and a potential Bradley Beal buyout. And they've positioned themselves financially to be able to add both of those guys pending a Beal buyout. How would you feel about the Clippers if they added both Chris Paul and Bradley Beal? Where does that put them in your eyes?
I think probably near the top of the Western Conference. I mean, they're certainly among one of the top 5 teams there. We've talked about this before. The West, a very difficult place to, very, very difficult to analyze and say for certain which team emerges at the top. You have Oklahoma City, as you've said before, in the top tier there, with Houston and Denver being the second tier, and then everybody else kind of competing there for the rest of the playoff seeding. I don't know where this puts the Clippers. I would say the Clippers might vault into that second tier alongside Houston and Denver, because I just think those are the right pieces to kind of fit in. Like Beal, I know he's been again dismissed because of his role in Phoenix, and he was getting paid all this money, and it seemed like he was more problematic than he actually was. He just wanted to continue to get paid and wanted to be able to control where he was traded to. Those don't sound like unreasonable requests for a player of his caliber. I still think he's a pretty good player and capable of contributing at a high level. And so for him to be able to accept another lesser role in Los Angeles, I think it would benefit them greatly. And it just to add more depth, to play alongside a guy like CP3. You've got Bogdanovic on the roster. You've got James Harden there. It's an older team, certainly, but I think a team that understands what's at stake here and can still play at a high level. Like we saw them play very, very well last year. And I don't have any reason to doubt that they would continue to add to that and build on that this year. And I think they would be a even more complete team than they were last year when they caught a lot of people by surprise.
I would be, and not to forget the addition of Brook Lopez right in free agency. I would be legitimately, I'd be legitimately scared of the Clippers if they managed to pull off adding both Chris Paul and Bradley Beal to their already existing team that they have put together right now. And so that's certainly something to be on the lookout for. Going through a few of these names elsewhere on the list, because we talked a little bit about Paul, Westbrook, kind of all signs are pointing towards Al Horford joining the Warriors at this point. They're just kind of waiting to figure out the whole Kuminga situation at this point. But going through some of the non-restricted free agent names available on this list here, we've got guys like Malcolm Brogdon and Ben Simmons are still out there, DeAnthony Melton, Alec Burks, Gary Payton II, Torrey Craig, Amir Coffey, Chris Boucher, Trey Lyles, Precious Achua, Bol is still out there, and a couple fives, Thomas Bryant, Bismack Biyombo, DeAndre Jordan. Of any of those names that I mentioned, David, or any other names that you can think of off the top of your head, who do you think would be the most, I guess, the sneakiest value add for a team looking for just one more depth piece, or potentially that 9th or 10th guy in a rotation to really flesh out a roster?
I don't know that any of them fit that description, to be honest with you, because they all have the capacity to do so, but they all have their glaring warts. And I tend to see it more as the other way, because some of those players, their NBA careers will be over, or they'll just become it happened. A player that I always think of in that sense was Greg Monroe, a guy who you always think of he's working out here locally in South Florida, and he's just no longer a player, even though he's still young. He was still a contributor. He was still in his opinion, of course, a high level productive player. And yet all of a sudden you just wind up finding yourself on the fringes of the NBA fraternity. And all of a sudden you stop getting those phone calls. And so I think all those players that you listed could find a good place for them to wind up being valuable and productive. But I tend to think of it more, again, from that other perspective, that they won't. A handful of those players you just named, their careers might be over. And that's kind of a bummer to think about. But it's also just the reality is that, they're probably going to be brought on here and there. Maybe they get a 1-year deal. And then from there, it's basically a short ride out the league.
I'll tell you what, health permitting, I think DeAnthony Melton is one of the most fascinating, like buy low free agents still left on the market. I know that he had, Golden State had really high hopes for him this past season. He had the knee injury, winds up missing the whole year. But man, like a healthy DeAnthony Melton can be a terror as a point of attack defensive piece. He's a very solid 3-point shooter, good floor spacer, decent secondary ball handler. Like he's a guy that, depending on how his rehab is going, and if a team, buys low on him, low risk, high reward kind of play, I like that name the most.
But do you want to take a chance? Again, we just talked about the apron and all the restrictions. Can I bring in a guy like Melton where I have to pay him even the vet minimum or maybe a little bit more, or I can get some undrafted rookie who might offer just as much value? And if I can just develop it, we're talking about maybe carving out 5 to 15 minutes per game for a player of this caliber. And yes, you're absolutely right that Melton should be a high-level contributor, could be if he's healthy. But you know what? Given the new restrictions and economics of the NBA, it behooves these teams to say, you know what? I'd rather just pay much less money to an undrafted player who I could put on a contract like that, and then not have to worry about paying any kind of punitive tax or penalty as a result. So it's a bummer, but that's how players get phased out.
Honestly, totally fair point. We want your thoughts, though. Who are the best remaining NBA free agents on the market, and where would you like to see some of them ultimately sign? Where could some of these guys still be impact contributors? Let us know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Coming up, Las Vegas Summer League storylines to monitor. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On NBA Game Night. We are ready for real Summer League to get underway here, David, because the California Classic doesn't count. I maintain that each and every offseason, the California Classic is not real Summer League. It doesn't start until it's boots on the ground in Las Vegas. And with that, let's get into some of the Las Vegas Summer League storylines to pay attention to here, some of the marquee matchups that'll be on the horizon, as well as potential breakout candidates for guys who are going back for their second or possibly even third Summer League appearances. Let's start with some of the obvious ones here, David. Guys like Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, those guys. Now, kind of unconventionally, we aren't going to see those guys play in the very first game against one another because the NBA decided to slot Cooper Flagg against Bronny James and the Lakers as their first marquee matchup. I don't necessarily agree with that. I love it when the top picks play against each other, and so we'll have to wait until July 12th to get the awaited Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper matchup. How are you feeling about those two guys facing off against each other, and who do you think ultimately gets the better of that matchup?
Oh, I don't know. It feels like I'm excited to, and yet I always feel underwhelmed by them because I feel like both of them are aware enough to realize that they're playing a role on their teams, and it's not about these individual matchups. They rarely play out that way, like where one player just wants to go at it. It's almost always, just understanding how to fit into the team and maximize their opportunities to come away with a dub. And I think that's both of these players understand that. So I can't say for certain, have not looked at both the rosters respectively and find out to see exactly which team is better constructed. And it's also Summer League. So, you know what? The wins and losses don't matter. You just want to see these players take incrementally better steps towards progression. And that's what I'm looking for, is seeing them show whatever it is, that X factor, whether or not they've kind of developed something over the summer, if they're second-year players or third-year players. Like, I want to see them be able to continue to develop and grow and show whether or not they belong at this level. And I think of the two players, I think Harper will probably have the better run there. Just in that matchup alone, I just think he'll get those opportunities, and I think Flagg might not be there just yet.
I think that guards are traditionally a little bit more better suited for the Summer League environment anyways.
Sure.
Obviously Flagg, and it's not a discredit to him. He's a more than capable ball handler and a guy who can create his own opportunities. But when you're playing a forward role or on the wings, or if you're a big man especially, then your role is so contingent on whether or not your guards will ultimately get you the basketball and,
Yes.
kind of serving you up on a silver platter. And because it's Cooper Flagg, because he's the number one overall pick, I'm sure he will be a focal point for the Mavs Summer League offense. And that coaching staff will absolutely make sure that he gets his touches, gets an opportunity to really showcase himself. But at the same time, he's still at the mercy of his guard play and whether or not they will actually get him the ball, whereas Dylan Harper gets to, bring the rock up and then initiate offense and do things himself. I will say, looking at some of these other kind of matchups that are teed up here for Summer League. So obviously there's Bronny James and Cooper Flagg on July 10th, Flagg versus Dylan Harper on the 12th. We've got Ace Bailey and Con Knippel on the 11th. So Jazz versus Hornets. So that should be a really good one. And it'll be interesting to see, how Bailey, I guess, how he looks, how he continues to look for the Jazz, especially with all the scuttlebutt about, does he want to be in Utah? Does he not want to be in Utah? All that stuff going on. And then the Nets and Wizards should be a very high octane, I'll say, matchup between Jaeger Dimon and then Trey Johnson taking on it, going against each other in that matchup. That should be a really good one. And here's my sneaky favorite Summer League team, David, going and look at having kind of parsed through some of the rosters. The Phoenix Suns Summer League roster, I don't know what they're going to do for offense, but defensively, my goodness, their Summer League roster is actually kind of stacked because they're going to have Kaman Malawach, they'll have Rasheer Fleming, they'll have Ryan Dunn, they'll have Oso Ighodaro. I guess Kobe Brea is going to have to do all the offensive heavy lifting for them, but that roster from a defensive standpoint looks like it's going to have some really low scoring affair kind of games for any teams going up against them.
But that so rarely translates there because not everybody's giving 110%, et cetera. So you wonder how they're going to find enough points enough offense to actually find any way of making those games semi-interesting. I don't know. I'm curious to see it too, but we'll see how it all plays out.
Do any of these top prospects in your eyes have to, you talk about, and we'll get to some of the potential breakout guys here in just a moment, second and third year guys to kind of monitor, keep an eye out for, but do any of these top prospects actually have to do anything or prove anything? Or is this just kind of an introduction for the fan base to see, this is the player we drafted. This is what you're hoping to see, or this is what we're excited to show you next season when basketball is actually real again?
I don't think so. I tend, again, to not put that much stock or weight in what happens at the Summer League level because we've seen players struggle and then have great breakouts during regular season and vice versa. We've seen Summer League standouts and they're kind of what happened to that guy who was so good at Summer League? Because it's Summer League. It's such a unique environment. I would say no player has more pressure on them to perform than Cooper Flagg just because of the expectations of the number one pick and replacing to some extent, at least in theory, the shell of Luka Doncic that's still left behind. And so those are really big shoes to fill, and I don't think he's expected to fill them necessarily on his own, but there's some hope that he can become that kind of superstar level player there. So I think that's basically where it ends for me, is watching Flagg and whether or not he could at least show signs of being that kind of player that could eventually become a star for the Dallas Mavericks.
All right, now thinking about some of the returning prospects to Vegas Summer League, because every year it feels like we have a few guys who come back from the previous year, rookies who have now, they got 1 year of NBA experience under their belt. Sometimes it stretches out to guys who are, coming back for their second or sometimes even third Summer League performance. Who do you have in mind, David? And I can go first if you want me to, because I've got a bit of home cooking on this side of things. But who do you have in mind as possible breakout candidates, guys to keep an eye on in Summer League who you'd like to see maybe come out and dominate? Maybe they're stepping into bigger roles next season, that kind of thing.
You know what? Speaking of home cooking, there's a couple players in the Heat roster that might have that opportunity too. One, Khalil Ware, obviously, he had some big moments as a rookie for Miami, and yet I think there's more for him to show. He was struggling a little bit in the California Classic. I don't know if that's going to be the case moving forward. He did shine last year in Vegas. He should continue to do so. Pelle Larsson, their second-round pick, also had some big moments, and he winds up just playing with all-out hustle all the time. And so those are the kind of players you watch there. But I'm curious about Daron Holmes making his debut for Denver, really, because he unfortunately struggling. He suffered a season-ending Achilles tear as a rookie and never really got a chance to showcase what he can do. And I was I'm bullish on his ability heading into last year's draft. And so for him to be able to step into a role now and be able to play at a high level, I'm curious to see what version of Holmes we get.
Yeah, Dayron Holmes was one of the guys that I had jotted down as like kind of a must watch for this year at Summer League. Really unfortunate, injury to him last year, but it could be a really important part of the puzzle for the Nuggets this upcoming season. So a chance to really showcase his talent. Another guy who dealt with some injury stuff, Devin Carter, missing Summer League last year, then training camp and the start of last season because of that shoulder surgery. And he's going to very much have the chance to be like the guy for the Kings Summer League squad and potentially a sizable role on the Kings roster this upcoming season. Alex Sarr slated to perform again. So although Sarr, I think, did a solid job in his rookie year, for the Wizards. So I don't think he necessarily needs to come out and, prove anything in Summer League. It's just an opportunity for him to get some reps in with his other teammates that are also returning for more Summer League experience this time around, as well as playing with Trey Johnson for the first time. Should be fun. And then the home cooking on my end, it's going to be Reed Sheppard, because Reed Sheppard, number 3 overall pick from last year, didn't really have much of a chance to showcase himself during the season because the Rockets, he's kind of, has been unfortunately one of the casualties of their rebuild, of their timeline being expedited. And so, he lost the role that he did have to Aaron Holiday about a quarter of the way through the season. He just really wasn't ready for it. Deer in headlights a little bit early on, started to pick up on some things as the season progressed and certainly looked like a completely different player by the end of the year. But at that point, the Rockets were playoff bound. They were the number 2 seed in the West. They weren't going to reintroduce a rookie into their rotation at that point. So with the moves that the Rockets have made, with the fact that they didn't go out and get any additional guard help this offseason, they're putting a lot of eggs in the Reed Sheppard basket going into next year. The fact that he is their only backup guard coming off the bench behind Fred VanVleet and Amin Thompson as their starting backcourt. And so there's a lot of pressure on Reed Sheppard to be able to deliver. And so for me, this is an opportunity. This is that first glimpse look at Reed Sheppard after his rookie season is concluded, after the playoff run is over. He's had a couple months to, be working on his game post, the end of the Rockets season. What does he look like? For me, returning players, guys who have had a year of experience under their belt, they need to come out and look like the best player on the floor, in my opinion. Like if you don't come out and look better than all this other fringe NBA competition, that's already a little bit of a red flag. For me, I just want to see Reed, perform to expectations, which he should. He was the number 3 overall pick for a reason.
Absolutely. I love that point. Yeah. Second year players, after a year of actually training at a higher level, you should be able to be dominant. If not, it is a concern that they're not able to showcase their skills or not know exactly how to take advantage of these. It's the nuances, how to take advantage of mismatches, how to create those advantages for yourself, how to use your body in a way where you're not just relying on your physical tools, but also how to play more smartly and be able to create better opportunities for yourself and teammates. So those are all things that you expect second-year players to be able to showcase. And if not, maybe they're not quite ready for the NBA game.
We want your storylines to look out for at Las Vegas Summer League. Who are you most interested in watching compete at Summer League? Let us know your thoughts in the YouTube comments, but that's going to do it for our edition of Locked On NBA. Be sure to be on the lookout for our sister show, the other Locked On NBA show on this very same podcast feed, or check them out on YouTube. Go subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. For your next listen, go find the Locked On show for your favorite team. Until then, we'll catch you guys on our very next game night.